about our carbon footprint with some special guests. But many of you on the call will remember and recognize Will Simpson of Green Circle Ideas, who is here today to kind of kick us off and introduce us to our esteemed speakers and their presentation. And so Will, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Joanna. And please flag me down or cut in if my Wi-Fi cuts out while I'm speaking. So good to be back with everybody here with the Green Education Series. Carbon. Carbon is the main building block of all life. It's all around us. It's in our atmosphere at an atomic level, and it makes up every living thing we've ever known. And yet carbon emissions pose the greatest threat that our civilization has ever known. So the conversation on drawing down carbon emissions is one that's become a major focal point all around the world for governments, for businesses, and I think more recently, even for consumers. It's also deeply complex, and I think it's somewhat elusive to many of us because as easy as it is to see the effects of climate disruption, large scale, I think it's really difficult to understand emissions in the abstract because they're intangible, they're invisible to the naked eye, and so we can't really see them in our day-to-day lives. So Green Circle has been working with our friends at Climate Partner to put the beauty and wellness industry's actions under the microscope and to really understand what are some of the problems that our industry poses around climate emissions, and how do we solve the carbon crisis that exists within our and our guests' everyday service lives. From the transportation that our staff and our guests use to actually get to our facilities, to the electricity powering our operations, everything we do has a carbon footprint. And so the question is, how do we address this proactively? So Climate Partner, Patrick and Kelsey here, Climate Partner is a solutions provider for corporate climate action. So their work enables businesses to really take meaningful climate action by calculating that carbon footprint and then ultimately making products and services climate neutral. Together with Green Circle Ideas and Climate Partner, we've actually created a solution that enables all service businesses in the wellness and beauty category to become certified carbon neutral. So we're providing kind of a value-added service while also reflecting the values of the organization itself and supporting the larger environmental, social governance commitments of our members and of Green Circle. I think with that, I'll sort of step back because I can only speak so much about carbon before I just start repeating myself. I want to really introduce our two subject matter experts here. So we've got Kelsey Donahue, who's a Master of Sciences and the Sustainability Consultant at Climate Partner, and Patrick Ronai, who's the Commercial Sustainability Manager at Climate Partner. And together today, our goal is to really walk through the challenges posed by our global carbon emissions, the opportunities that are available to take action, and how together, through our efforts, we can create a carbon-free future. Take it away, Patrick.
Yeah, thank you very much, Will, for this introduction and also for the opportunity with Green Circle and GSN Planet for us to give a brief introduction what it is about taking climate action. Kelsey and I myself are very excited to do this webinar for a long time. And let me just open a presentation real quick. Just nod if you can see it already. Okay. Yes, perfect. So the next 45 minutes, what we want to do with you is give you a brief introduction what Climate Partner does, but then it's answering also the question, why do we actually need climate action? Then we prepared a little activity for you, so you will learn your own personal carbon footprint. Then we take this knowledge and transition to what it is for businesses for taking corporate carbon footprints. And we took here an example from the hotel industry, because maybe some of the participants are from the hotel and spa industry here. And finally, we'll conclude with an open round and Q&A. So when we talk about Climate Partner, we were founded in 2006 in Munich in Germany. So maybe hear also a little bit of my German accent in there. But today we've grown so much that we are over 500 climate partnerians across the globe, really, with over 5,000 companies that we work with for taking climate action. And when we talk about climate action, it's basically taking 5 steps. So first, measure your corporate carbon footprint. Then we look if you have products and services that we can measure. But this could also be an event. For example, if you have a conference at your hotel and you want to have a carbon neutral conference, that's something that we can measure as well. But no matter what we measure, everything comes down as being the basis to actually reduce your carbon emissions. Step 3. Step 4 is everything that you can't reduce, you can offset with climate protection projects. And the last step is how to communicate. So what we like to do is we would like to take you through all these 5 steps today, so you have a good idea at the end of the webinar what climate action strategy actually means. But first, why do we need climate? You probably all seen the effects or read about it. Rising sea levels, glaciers melting. With rising sea levels, natural habitats are in danger, but also businesses are at risk. If you think about hotels on islands or at coastlines, by the end of the century, there's a good chance they will be flooded. So it's a topic that everybody has to take care or considering while doing business as well. Another example, you probably remember last year, the crazy heat wave we had, all the wildfires in California and other parts of our country. So those are just effects of global warming. But what is global warming actually? And I'm not a scientist, so I don't want to dig into the science too much. But the simple answer, it's greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide or methane. So what happens when these greenhouse gases are in our atmosphere? They have the ability to absorb infrared radiation. So basically they're trapping the heat, and that causes global warming. Now the beauty of our nature is that we can actually capture carbon emissions by our trees, by our plants, or our soil. So this would be actually a good thing. The big but is, or the problem is, in the last decades, through increased consumption, production, fossil fuels, our Earth is at a great imbalance. So we are emitting more greenhouse gases than the Earth can capture. And that you can see here on the left in this chart, historical, we're emitting more and more carbon emissions. So by the end of the century, science says that we are looking at a global warming of around 3 degrees Celsius, which is around 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's way too much to be at a balance. So where we need to get is go down to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is in line to the Paris Climate Agreement. So that's where we're headed. And you can see the next 10 years are very crucial to reduce our emissions in order to have a chance to keep global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius and prevent further climate change and more drastic floods, wildfires, and etc. So that's what we're looking at the moment. In our opinion, it takes too long for governments to have policies in place. So it takes more all of us as individuals to change consumption behavior, but especially working with businesses because they have the ability to make changes quick. And that's why at Climate Partner, we work with all kinds of industries from consumer goods, retail, financial services, mobility, but also the tourism industry. And you find some very large companies here, but we pride ourselves that we also have solutions for very small companies. One of my examples is a one-man show. He's doing bread baskets and selling them on Amazon. So that's a client of ours as well. So very small, but then you have the nest list, very complex questions. So we try to help everyone taking climate action. And as diversified as our client portfolio is what we do with products. So you find everything from carbon neutral bananas, frozen pizza, ice cream, jackets, mattresses. So products you use in your daily life. Because in the end, our idea is to have consumers to drive that impact and have a choice. I want to buy more climate friendly products. And that's what Climate Partner does in certifying all these products. And with that background, I'd like to hand over to Kelsey now to see or introduce you to carbon accounting on a personal level. So what does it mean and what is your personal carbon footprint? And I will post a link into the chat. So you can click on this link and follow Kelsey while she's doing that exercise live with you, okay? Just a second.
Yeah.
So you should have the link to Climate Partner U now in the chat. And I will open the window where you can start this journey.
Here we go. All right. So let me know when everyone has it open, and I'm just gonna slowly go through this. This is supposed to be a fun, interactive activity where we can each kind of learn our own personal footprints. And today we can just do kind of estimates. And if you want to be more exact, you know, go ahead and do it again after. But it's just to give you a general idea of your personal carbon footprint. And then we're gonna compare that to a corporate carbon footprint after that. But can anyone give me a nod if they got it open already? Thumbs up. Okay, let's go. So if you click on let's go, there's two options to calculate your personal carbon footprint. The first is the fastest one, and the second is 10 minutes or longer. So let's just do the fast one for now, because in the end, it actually kind of took me a little bit. So we're gonna click on the 3-minute one. And then how do I, there we go. Okay, so calculate the emissions of your air travels in the last year. So focusing on 2021, because that just happened and that's a year time frame. How much did you travel? I know it says within Europe, but let's just say this is States because it's about the same, just taking into account like domestic flights. For me, I think I did only about 3, which might seem like a lot to people, but I had to move to Boston. So that was a flight or 2. And then another flight there. So just kind of remember last year how many flights you took. And then did you fly out to Europe, for example? Go ahead and put that number there. And then what class? That actually does matter in terms of spacing between seats, the food you're served and whatnot. I always fly economy, so I'm gonna click economy. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Next page. All right. Okay, what means of transportation did you use in the last year? Did you not drive at all? That's usually not common in the States. I actually had a car. I did live in Seattle. So I was trying to calculate. I commuted in with the link, it's called, in Seattle. So I didn't drive my car to work, but I definitely traveled a lot on the weekends. So I just kind of estimated, I don't know, an hour and a half over weekly. So you can choose weekly here. So per week for me in my head was a little easier. And the caveat here is, you know, it's still in metric units. So I knew I drove an hour and a half. So, you know, about 90 miles. And then I just used Google Translate to translate miles to kilometers. And so for me, that came out to about 144 kilometers per week. But whatever's easiest for you and what makes sense in your own mind. What type of engine? There's some options here, but mine's just a combustion engine. But if you had an electric car, there's that option there as well. Okay.
Yeah, I can see Will is calculating kilometers in his head. So it's 1.7 times 1.7.
I just used Google. It was easier. Let me know when you want me to go the next page.
I'm all set.
All right. So electricity consumption is obviously really important where you're living. How many people are in your household? For me, I live on my own, so I'm just going to say 1, and then it'll automatically calculate your consumption for the last year. In terms of what energy was used, there's different options here, but I know mine was non-green energy. All right, and next, heating. What type of heating did you use? For me, you could say no idea, I guess, is an option. I know mine was natural gas, but then there's other options here as well, if you know that. And then how big? actually, I didn't know how big mine was. I had to look up my building and kind of Google the average square footage. So mine came out to be like a normal apartment's 525 average square foot, at least in Boston. So I just kind of estimated. And then again, I use Google Translate to transfer the units because here it says meters squared. So I'll just put in mine here.
Yeah, if you're not sure, an average two-person household has around 80 square meters. If you have a family with 2 kids, usually you have around 100 to 120. If you're even a bigger family, put in a little bit more, but those would be average values that you can also put.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Long distance heating, would that be like electrical baseboard heat without a heat pump?
I'm actually not sure on that one. Do you know?
No, not really.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to the diets. Are you vegan, vegetarian, mixed diet? Flexitarian is what I am, so I'm gonna put that down. Then we're approaching the end here. So how many clothes did you buy last year? I actually am not a big shopper, so I just put 10 pieces of clothes last year. And then how much did I spend on consumer goods, furniture, electronic appliances? I moved last year, so I had to estimate quite a bit. I just said around $3,000 for furniture and whatnot, and then I had to translate that to euros. So for me, it comes out to 2,700. Again, this is just like an approximate. And then your summary already. Okay, so mine is showing, this is just always kind of fun to see. The air travel is always a big one. I visit home quite a bit, so I know this is something I personally need to work on. And even in corporate carbon footprints, you'll see that air travel is a huge emission contributor in general. So even with the personal one, you can see that that's my highest as well. Road travel, I didn't think I put in that many miles, but still for me, that's second highest. And then obviously it goes down the list here. And then you can keep going. Say, all right, next. Okay, so it says that I am 0.63 tons above the global average. Not a good thing, but good to know. And then this kind of goes into, okay, so I know I'm a little bit above average. What can I do now, basically? And the thing is, you can offset through this program, but that's not the point. The point to offset is to become carbon neutral now, but the mission is to look at where you need to reduce and go through each of those categories and work on reducing them, so that with time, you won't have to offset as much. All right, and this is just going into more detail. It's helping me, okay, I could eat more greens, so less meat. Heat smarter, maybe I can look into green energy options. Then obviously, I didn't think I put in that many clothes, but it's saying I could buy a little less. Maybe with the consumption part where I put in $3,000. I mean, moving is a big expense, so that kind of makes sense. All right, so I'm curious to hear, was anyone surprised by their results, or how did it go? Anyone want to share theirs?
I'll just share that I need to do better. I recognize that travel, both between my and my partner's work, that's an area, but also my work travel, my flights.
Oh yeah, flights. Yeah, that's always the biggest one.
Fortunately, I'm pleased to say that I am carbon neutral because of the work that we do with Climate Partner.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I recognize that that's only one part of it. The other part is actually drawing down your emissions to begin with.
Yeah.
And with that, Kelsey, I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about the difference between carbon neutral and net zero,
Yeah.
and what the goal is in drawing down.
Right. So the point of carbon neutrality is to be carbon neutral right now. And I think Patrick has a perfect slide on it and he's going to dive into detail. But the basics is carbon neutral as being carbon offsetting right now to become neutral, but that doesn't mean net zero. So it's like you're working towards identifying your hot spots, reducing where you can each year. You'll see this graph once he switches. So that you don't have to offset as much. And in the end, you get through all those categories where you just get to the unavoidable emissions and then anything from there, and then you're at net zero. So Patrick's going to show you the graph. It's a better visual than what I'm explaining.
But that's basically it, yeah.
But that is basically it, yeah.
So I will jump into the presentation unless somebody else from the group wants to share their experience in the carbon footprint. Give it a couple seconds.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if flights was highest for everyone, because that's what I would kind of guess. Okay.
Okay, then we will just continue with the transition to the corporate carbon footprint.
Yeah, so now that we became more familiar with the categories, you kind of get the idea. So this is just sharing in general. I'm sure you've heard of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions that are shared by the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. It's kind of the world-renowned protocol that the International Panel on Climate Change, all these top scientists have put it together or helped put it together at least and approve it. And it put all the emissions into 3 different scopes. So this is just a nice visual here. So scope 1 is your direct emissions. So as we can see in this middle section here, the light blue in the center, this is going to be direct emissions. So think of burning. So combustion, burning of fuels. It'll be the business vehicle fleet. So any burning of fuels there. It'd also be any heat generated by your company. So not purchased by your company, but if you just happen to actually put out the heat yourself. Refrigerant leakages are a really big one. So you have air conditioner and you get it checked once or twice a year, and it's checked for refrigerant leakages. So that's really important when we measure corporate carbon footprints, because this can be a major contributor to emissions. So that'll be scope 1. Scope 2 and 3 are indirect emissions. So scope 2 here, for example, they list it here, is anything purchased. So purchased electricity, purchased cooling, steam heating, whatever's purchased, that's indirect scope 2. And then lastly, scope 3, it's upstream and downstream emissions. So usually anything in the value chain. So you're a part of this value chain process, but you're not directly involved with the emissions here. And so here's some listed examples. We have purchased goods and services, transportation distribution, employee commuting is considered scope 3, business travel. So let's say for your company, you're flying to all these states to have meetings, that's going to be considered scope 3. So yeah, that's when scope 3 gets a little more technical and complex, but we'll see in the next slide kind of a general of where we see percentages happening. And, yep. Okay, so this is just saying in general, we can do the corporate carbon footprints, we can do personal ones, obviously, but we also do product carbon footprints, which are huge contributors to the environment as well. So this is just in general how the Greenhouse Gas Protocol adheres to this chain here. So starting from raw material extraction of a product. So where did they come from? What country? How are they transported? What are the exact materials? So the logistics involved in that, to the production facility where they're made. What's the electricity involved in making that product? The heat consumption, all to the logistics. So let's say they need to be shipped or air cargo all the way to LA, and then they need to go to the Amazon distribution center, just as examples. All of the logistics involved in that and the packaging as well will be measured. And Climate Partner specifically takes out the usage phase unless you think that's a major contributor to your product life cycle. And then we include the end of life, so the waste involved. So is it being recycled? Is it going to the landfill? Is it electronic waste? All these things are completely different in terms of the amount of emissions. So next, we're going into the reduction. So again, we kind of find out the categories, right? We've mentioned what? Flights, electricity, all these different categories. And on the left here, you can see scope 1, 2, and 3 kind of separated out. We thought this was just a good example because it's of a hotel that Climate Partner has performed the footprint for. So just kind of going down the line here, scope 1 was about 21% of the footprint, and the highest was scope 3 at 61%. So just to give you a general, in this case for the hotel, scope 3 emissions made up the largest portion of their emissions. And this can be attributed to, specifically for this hotel, the gastronomy. So, you know, the food that was served, it matters. If you're serving meat at every meal, that's going to really increase the emissions there. And then here they also had 15% for laundry, for example. That's a pretty high electricity consumption. But here's some ways on the right here that you can optimize these processes and make sure that those emissions with time get a little less. So for heat supply, for example, you can transition to more sustainable energy sources. For electricity consumption, there's always options for green energy. You can even buy green energy certificates through us. Let's see, gastronomy. So we already kind of found, or I mentioned, you know, if you change the meals that are served, that really makes a difference. So maybe just serving more or kind of mixing it up with the vegetarian options, reducing animal products that are served, so dairy products. Yeah, just going down the line here, we'll provide this presentation after, but this is just kind of just some examples. You can also purchase carbon neutral print products. But yeah, carbon footprints are always different, but I'd say for a hotel, this looks pretty normal to have scope 3 be the highest.
And I also think it's quite interesting if you look at the water and the waste, it's a very low carbon footprint. And when I'm in hotels somewhere across the country, I always read those little signs where it says, you know, if you don't want to need your towel washed every day or your bed line changed, there you can see that hotels already implemented that policies, I think some 5 or 10 years ago, to do something for the climate. And it shows in this carbon footprint as well that the water waste has really gone down, which was a big contributor some 10 years ago in hotels. So I think you can all relate to those signs when you read them in the bathroom, that you can do your part if you don't need a fresh towel every day, right?
Good point, yeah.
Okay, next part of our climate action strategy, we're coming to the offset part. And I think this is a very good graph to show because it explains that reduction plays a key role on our transition to a net zero world. And in the beginning, I said our Earth is at an imbalance because we're emitting more than we can capture. And net zero means actually by restoring this balance. So we are only emitting as much carbon that our Earth can capture. And that's as a target in Paris Agreement is in 2050. Maybe you heard of the climate pledge from Amazon that we're part of. So we try to get companies already doing this by 2040. But it is a transition until 2040. And we need to take responsibility also today. So that's why we offer carbon offset projects. So you see, once we transition down on the upper bars, you see the lower bars that we need to offset today, but reduce the offset amount every year as we are reducing. And that's when we talk about carbon neutrality. So that's the difference between net zero in the future. On the path to net zero, you can be carbon neutral today by offsetting everything that you can reduce right now. To give you an idea about offset projects, so they can be in various forms. So you have green energy projects. You can support solar energy or wind energy. A lot of our clients like nature-based solutions. So building a forest in Brazil, having some agricultural solutions. Then we have projects with more social impact, clean drinking water. It's a really big problem in Africa. So we help those communities. One of the projects I'm passionate about is clean cooking stoves in Rwanda. That's, by the way, our climate map, where we can also see where our projects are and what the different projects are doing. Just now going back to my passionate project in Rwanda, clean cooking stove. So just to give you an example, these communities, traditionally, the women in the community, they were cooking over open fire. Children are going to the forest to chop wood. So it's very inefficient, it pollutes the air. And just by providing these clean cooking stoves, these communities are saving 10,000 tons carbon dioxide per year. But that's not where it stops. All of our projects, they help United Nations sustainability goals. So those are the ones in the colorful boxes. So this project also helps the community when it comes to gender equality, to better health, to better air quality. Children get education in schools. And to be fair, these projects, they don't get any funding from banks or investors because there's no return on invest. So these projects, they rely on the carbon credits. So our carbon sinks in the US, when we offset them being carbon neutral, we actually help them to improve their lives and save carbon dioxide. So that's what all these projects are about. And we like to let our clients choose what kind of projects they support, what fits their company or their product. For example, some companies, they want to reduce their plastic in their products. So they also want to help the plastic bank, where they are taking plastic out of the ocean. Some companies like more building trees because it fits better to their products. So we let our clients choose which projects they're passionate about. And like I said, check out our climate map, which one is fitting to your company. I'm pretty sure, I think, correct me, Will, but I think Green Circle is supporting a bamboo forest in Nicaragua, if I'm correct. So also a very nice example of a good project.
Yeah, so we've been involved in the past with Plastic Bank. We did that last year through our Earth Month initiative. We recovered 2.1 million bottles of ocean-bound plastic, but we wanted to do something a little bit different on the front end, and so that's why we invested in afforestation of this clumping bamboo in Nicaragua.
Perfect, very good. Yeah, so we're already at our last step of taking climate action of the strategy, and the last step is communication. And we understand if you take responsibility today, if you offset your emissions, you don't want to be called out for greenwashing, which is the term you might have heard in the media. So our approach at Climate Partner is to give you a label where it says you're a carbon neutral company or a carbon neutral product, but we back up this claim with a unique ID tracking. So this is an example of Aldi, a client of ours, a retailer in Germany, but also in the US, where it shows you what did we actually measure? What is your carbon footprint? What does carbon neutrality actually mean? So there's a definition. Which projects are you supporting? And this is set up on a yearly basis or on product basis. So you have the transparency for consumers, for stakeholders, when you tell your story about taking climate action, being carbon neutral. So you can always back it up. You can even print this label with the QR code on your packaging if you have products. So it's very transparent and an easy way to show what you're doing. And this helps a lot to back up the claim. Yeah, so that's all about taking climate action from Climate Partner with us. Now I'd like to head over to Will for an open round and also a Q&A session.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Kelsey. That's phenomenal education, and I think really valuable, not just for the spa service locations, but also for any manufacturers or distributors who may be hearing this conversation today or in the future, to really understand how they can integrate intentional carbon offsetting into their business structure. So thank you. I wanted to bring this back to the group, and I'm thinking maybe we could just break out into two independent groups. And I want to ask you, what has this session taught you about the world of carbon emissions, and ultimately about your organization's ability to reduce or offset its emissions? So I'm going to put that question in the chat box here. essentially, I just want to facilitate a conversation around, what is this conversation bringing up for you, and where do you see your organization's ability to take action? As anyone who's sat through my education knows, I do try and make it actionable so that we're not just living in the abstract, but so that we can actually, do something about it. I hope your conversation was fruitful. We're like hanging in, and I'm watching the countdown. So, Said, maybe just share with us kind of where you were going with that, because it's an interesting takeaway following up on our conversation around becoming a B Corp.
Yeah. So it's these kinds of certifications that quantify or validate the actions that companies take in order to reduce their carbon footprint don't clean the environment. They only validate a company's intention to clean the environment, right? So we got to kind of make the distinction between the two. Dane of Force of Nature was describing how they don't ship water in their cleaning products around the world. They just ship the ingredients, the key ingredients, and then the consumer adds the water in their home, right? What I was saying is that just makes perfect intuitive sense. Shipping water around the world is got a huge carbon footprint. I get it. Now, trying to quantify that via climate partners or B Corp or another entity that you might do that only serves as a marketing benefit to appeal to a consumer who values these kinds of things. And as we've discovered in our business with B Corp certified, is that the consumer first have to then know that certifying agency to trust it in order for us to take claim our validity or authenticity through them. So in other words, in our case, for anytime you encounter someone say, hey, we're B Corp certified, the first thing we have to explain to them is what a B Corp is. And then once they see that, then they understand, and then maybe they give us a little bit of an acknowledgement for what we do. So all I'm just trying to say is that, it's kind of we do what we do, and Force of Nature, as Dane described, does what they do for the intention of being a more environmentally friendly business. Going through the different steps of getting the recognition is only value if the certifying agency has credibility with the audience already, with our marketing, target market. So anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid observation. And we've had this conversation. In fact, I was speaking with the B Corp just a couple of days ago, and they said, so we're a B Corp because we want to be a B Corp and we believe in it, but how do we get our guests to understand what that truly means? And I think that this is a hurdle that we need to overcome in business. But I also believe that as the consumer becomes more aware and more critical of the choices that they're making, this kind of distinction is just going to become that much more important. And so, maybe the average person doesn't understand what B Corp certification or working with Climate Partner truly means. But the example I always come back to is pre-pandemic, when I was booking travel, I would go onto Google Flights and I would choose the cheapest flight at the right time, and I was done. Now, when I go into Google Flights for the last year or so, it says this is the amount of CO2 equivalent.
I noticed that, yeah.
And what's really cool about that is it doesn't just tell you the amount of emissions, but it actually says this is 15% higher than average, or this is lower than average. So now, in addition to taking price into consideration, you can actually take the planet into consideration. And I think that as consumers become more aware of what carbon emissions are, what carbon offsetting is, and the overall need to draw down our emissions, we're going to be making decisions increasingly based on these types of criteria.
And I think maybe B Corp should look at our ID tracking, where it explains what it actually means. So maybe that would be a good example for B Corp to introduce that as well, because I think, and I believe, you need to educate the people more about what climate action means, what climate neutrality is, and that definitely helps if you can explain it and back it up. To conclude our session, before I give the final words to Will again, I also would like to invite you to join our Climate Partner Academy. It's free to register. So we have different sessions about climate action, what it means for companies, for products, for supply chains. We have topics, what happened at the last COP26. So that's always a means of education for the public as well. And in the end, if you have your business want to learn more about carbon neutrality for your specific business, just reach out to Kelsey and myself, and we're happy to walk you through. We got the feedback, it's sometimes a bit complicated what we told you today. We try to make it easy as possible. And like Kelsey is working every day with companies, we're there to help you to figure it out. So that's what we do. And thank you very much for your attention, everyone.
Very good. Thank you. One thing that we've learned over the last year is that Climate Partner is a true partner. This is not in everybody's wheelhouse by any means. This is, I think, quite lofty stuff. And I've been in the sustainability space for 12 years and still don't feel particularly confident speaking about carbon emissions. But I think that that's where really we need to turn it over to the experts who have done the work and who have all of this great historical data to be able to say, you know, if you're a property, this is what that means in terms of your emissions output. If you're a manufacturer and you're shipping internationally, this is what it means for you. And Climate Partner really does, because you've worked with so many groups in so many different sectors, you have really good historical data so that people don't feel like they're starting at ground zero, but that they actually have a true partner in the offsetting game. So I want to thank you again for everything you've done creating carbon neutral certification for Green Circle members. I want to thank you in advance because I know that everybody here who's joined the Green Spot Network has done so in an effort to truly understand and be able to mitigate their own environmental challenges. So I would encourage you all to please do the work with Climate Partner, even if it's just to better educate yourselves and understand what it is that we're all trying to fight against. Are there any final questions, or does anybody else want to contribute before we close this session? Okay. Well, thank you again, Patrick, Kelsey, and thanks everybody for making the time. We really do appreciate it. We hope that we delivered on the Sustainable Development Goal of quality education. And of course, number 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals is partnerships for the goals, which is what we're all here to do, so that together we can overcome these massive challenges and ultimately build a world that is inhabitable for all. So thank you.
Thank you, Will, for being willing. Yes, thank you, Will, and thank both of you, Patrick, for joining us today. And that was very valuable, and really appreciate your dedication to educating the GSN community. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your